As we mark 20 years of the war on terror, we mustn't forget that the Iraq war was actually born and raised in torture and lies, and that's something that the UK government was actually complicit in. When you find that the arms of the state have become co-opted in manufacturing consent for illegal wars or towards things that are targeting communities in a harmful way, then being independent in itself is a form of resistance. I think where we are at this current time and what we're witnessing, especially in terms of the way in which media is covering the situation between Russia and Ukraine, is important for all of us to look at and reflect. Of course, war and the loss of innocent lives everywhere and anywhere is always sad to see. But I think it is also important for us to look at the way in which we interact with the information that is being presented to us and how it has been presented in contrast over the last 20 years. Cage initiated a campaign which went live on the 31st of August 2021 to coincide with the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. The International Witness campaign was a collective of 59 partnering organisations from 18 different countries that came together to mark 20 years of the catastrophic war on terror and the impact that it's had on a global scale. So looking at the human cost of war and bringing together sort of survivors and experts, academics and organisers to think, to reflect and join us in the movement to support the demands of the campaign. The International Witness campaign had 4 demands. So the first one was acknowledgement of the crimes that were committed in the name of state-sponsored violence. Our second demand was accountability. Accountability for governments, state officials and individuals in particular that were engaged and have been engaged in misconduct since 2001. The third demand of the campaign was restorative justice, to seek justice, restorative justice for the victims and survivors of state-sponsored violence since 2001. The fourth demand of the campaign is a complete dismantlement of the infrastructure that has allowed these crimes to be possible. So the laws, the practices, the policies that have been enabled throughout this war. Through this campaign, we actually hold a mirror to the UK government, but also all of the nations in the world that have been complicit and taken part in this war and torture. And post 9/11, we saw the extension of American militarism backed by the UK. And that is something that the UK government must be held accountable for. As we mark 20 years of the war on terror, we mustn't forget that the Iraq war was actually born and raised in torture and lies, and that's something that the UK government was actually complicit in. When the war on terror was announced, the architects of this war described the men that had been kidnapped as the worst of the worst and that were later transferred to Guantanamo Bay. And 20 years on, we're still seeing that dark stain on humanity. This facility is still open with men still being held there. That was actually the catalyst for Cage's work. Initially, when Cage began its work, it was formerly Cage Prisoners, and it was documenting the names and profiles of these individuals to really show the world that justice must still be upheld. And it stood as a reminder to all people of consciousness that, we must uphold justice. The campaign also shed light on the domestic aspects of the war on terror. In the UK, what we've seen is 20 years of policy developments and legislation that have chipped away at the very fabric and layer of our society and community, creating deep discord and division amongst all, otherising Muslim communities and Muslim minorities across the board. An example of this is the UK government's Prevent strategy, which was pioneered in the UK but exported around the globe as CVE. The UK government's Prevent strategy in 2015 placed a legal responsibility on the public sector, so the NHS, schools, social workers, to apply the Prevent strategy and adopt it as part of their practice to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. What this actually means is mass policing and policing across sectors. This is about surveillance. It is about targeting minority communities. This is how the UK government has institutionalised Islamophobia en masse. The UK government and mainstream media across the board has played a significant role in manufacturing consent for the war on terror. One of the key features of this campaign is that we've been able to push back against that by engaging different media outlets across the board on a global level. We had over 70 media interventions where different organisations, including Cage, have been able to push back against the narrative that has sort of stuck over the last 20 years. And I think that forms a part of our resistance. In terms of media partners, we had the Canary as a partnering organisation in this campaign, which was wonderful to see because the Canary is an independent media outlet. And as I said, when you find that the arms of the state have become co-opted in manufacturing consent for illegal wars or towards things that are targeting communities in a harmful way, then being independent in itself is a form of resistance. So we were really happy to partner with the Canary and have them as partners in this campaign. And I think as a general reflection in terms of where we are now and how the media plays its part in covering certain aspects and the way in which it may cover certain events, it's important for us to realise what does resistance sort of look like in the face of that. And I think definitely independent is the way forward. So I think on a more mainstream level, the media have been reluctant to critically evaluate the war on terror. An example of that would be the Iraq war, sort of framing around the war on terror. I think in the absence of that critical evaluation, it creates a space for governments, for power to escape accountability. And so as we've sort of reached this point of 20 years of the war on terror, it's important to reflect on that point for those that are in the field, but also those that are outside of the field, to look at how do you change that? How do you change that culture? I think where we are at this current time and what we're witnessing, especially in terms of the way in which media is covering the situation between Russia and Ukraine, is important for all of us to look at and reflect. Of course, war and the loss of innocent lives everywhere and anywhere is always sad to see. But I think it is also important for us to look at the way in which we interact with the information that is being presented to us and how it has been presented in contrast over the last 20 years, especially when it comes to Iraq and Afghanistan and other conflict zones. Although the International Witness campaign has come to an end, I think one of the greatest things that's come out of this is that we've built a coalition of partners that are willing to continue the work and stay connected. There were several sort of layers of work that we have seen come out of this campaign, and that work will continue. Two things I do want to sort of bring to the fore. The first is the 8-point plan that has been led by former survivors of Guantanamo and also guards and activists and organisers and lawyers to close Guantanamo. That can be accessed at a website that has been launched called closingguantanamotogether.com. The second thing I'd like to sort of bring to the fore is the abolishprevent.com website, which basically documents the history and journey of the prevent strategy and also why it should be abolished. And Cage has presented an 8-point plan which really looks at a society beyond prevent. What does a society beyond prevent look like? What does a society that is not securitized look like? And I would urge everybody to have a look at that, because ultimately, if we want to move away from the policies and the practices that have become normalized and institutionalized, then it's really important that we start to look for ways in which we can undo some of that harm that has been put in place over the last 2 decades. The most powerful resistance in the face of oppression, in the face of tyranny, is always to hold the truth and to tell the truth, and to stay principled within that structure, and that is not always easy to do. And so I think independent media is really important. So a shout out to all the outlets that are working hard to bring coverage and shed light